Many of Walt Disney's movies have become iconic, not only because of the inspiring heroes that prevail at the end of the story, but also because of the evil villains that stand in the way of our heroes' goals. With that in mind, it makes us wonder about what may have happened if, for example, Scar was not so Machiavellian, or if Captain Hook was not so obsessed with Peter Pan. Join us as we take a look at some of these Disney villains and see what they would be like if they were actually good. Gaston. Let's start the list with Gaston. Vain. Anyone that has seen Beauty and the Beast would tell you that there probably isn't a more arrogant character in the Disney universe. No one is as vain as Gaston. That is why he just couldn't believe that Belle rejected him. Who sets up a wedding with a woman before you even propose to her? What a weirdo. Short-tempered. Aside from being one conceited son of a gun, Gaston shows his hot temper every time he does not get his way. We all know that trouble is brewing, especially when Gaston has lost out on what he wants. Cunning. Despite being a narcissistic, short-tempered man, Gaston is surprisingly cunning. Just look at the time he raised a mob, not because the Beast was dangerous, but because he realized he would never have the love of Belle for himself. He certainly is not above using dirty tactics to have his way. Gaston was such a boorish individual. If only Belle could look to a character like Clement, the exact opposite of the brute Gaston. Modest. Considered to be just as handsome as Gaston, Clement is not all about his looks. Instead, he is a modest man of substance, mild-mannered. Clement is way less aggressive and not as quick to anger as the short-tempered Gaston. He definitely won't have caused as much of a ruckus as Gaston. Straightforward. Far from the cunning nature of Gaston, Clement is a straightforward man who lets people know exactly how he feels. None of that conniving stuff. With someone like this, maybe Belle wouldn't have had to hide in the library from Gaston. Maleficent! Next up, we have Maleficent. Who gets this mad after not being invited to a party? Vengeful. The first thing that we know about Maleficent is that she will take revenge on all those who wronged her. Just look at her as she cursed Aurora just because her parents did not invite her to the christening of the child. Add the fact that she was after King Stephen's head after he had cut off her wings in an act of betrayal, and you may find that Maleficent can keep a grudge or two. Ruthless. Watching the course of Sleeping Beauty as it runs, we have learned that Maleficent has no problems with taking any measures to enact her evil plans. From summoning thorns to surround the palace so that she could prevent the prince from saving Aurora, to turning into a literal dragon to enact her revenge, there is nothing that Maleficent won't do to see her plans through. Devious. Finally, aside from being ruthless and vengeful, Maleficent is also known to be a devious being. That is why she used magic to lure Aurora out of her 16-year hiding place. Maleficent had such bad vibes. I wonder what Aurora's life would have been like if she had a fairy like Benevolencia in her life. Merciful. For starters, her life would have been a lot easier because Benevolencia is much more merciful than Maleficent. Sure, they wronged you, but at least Benevolencia has enough sense not to take her revenge out on a kid. Humane. Aside from being merciful, Benevolencia is also humane. At the very least, she would not have set her goons on Aurora and the prince after the princess finally succumbed to the curse. Heck, she may not have cursed the kid to begin with. Candid. Far from being a devious being like Maleficent, Benevolencia is quite candid about how she feels about her foes. At the very least, they can see her coming. Captain Hook. Far from being as powerful as Maleficent, Captain Hook is one of the most terrible villains out there in his own right. Murderous villain. Fed up with Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, Captain Hook has sworn to take all measures to get rid of the little boys, even if it means that he makes those boys walk the plank or stab them through their little hearts. Murder is clearly on this mad captain's mind. Manipulative. Aside from being a murderous villain, he is also one manipulative character. Just look at the time he took advantage of an enraged Tinkerbell so that he could lead her to Peter's cave. Add the fact he would also use his brains to get out of promises and obligations with the use of the letter of the law rather than the spirit of it, and you'd find that Hook is one devious mind to mess with. Coward. As deadly and manipulative as Hook might be, he is quite the bully and the coward. Look at it this way. His arch nemesis are kids. Then there's the fact that he has never been able to get rid of the enemies his own size. Hey, don't look at me. Tell him to get rid of that croc first. What a dangerous man when you think about it. Let's take our minds off this character for a bit. Meet Captain Valor, the well-meaning Captain Benevolent. Far from the murderous creature that is Captain Hook, Captain Valor is a well-mannered individual that can handle his business without devolving into a murderous rage. Frank. Thanks to this level-headedness, Captain Valor will also be able to handle his business with Peter in a level-headed manner. With that in mind, there is every chance they would have squashed their beef long before it was devoted to the madness that exists between Peter and Captain Hook. Brave! He would also have been brave enough to handle that killer croc. Chances are he would also have two of his hands in this situation. Ursula. Finally, we turn to Ursula, the evil mistress of the seven seas. Cunning. Ursula is so despised because she is one manipulative sea witch. Taking advantage of Ariel to set off her plans to get her hands on the king's trident, Ursula is one evil witch. Vengeful. Aside from being a cunning witch, she is also a vengeful one. Seems to be a running theme with these villains. Well, if not for her desire to get revenge on King Triton for banishing her from the palace, Ariel may have had a much easier time getting the prince's attention. Lust. Ursula also has a lust for power that is powerful enough to consume anyone that gets in her way. In the end, it consumed the evil witch herself. Ursula was such an evil witch, Ariel never really stood a chance. What if Ariel had to deal with Selena, the kind-hearted witch, guileless? Unlike Ursula, Selena would have helped Ariel without trying to deceive her. Forgiving. Ariel would have had a much easier time with Selena because she would have let her grudge with King Triton go a long time ago. Self-control. Finally, Selena would have the self-control to curb her lust for power. Not an easy thing, but this would have made life easier for everyone in the kingdom. Scar. Now we turn to one of the most notorious Disney villains out there, Machiavellian. Watching Uncle Scar as he schemed his way to the throne of Pride Rock by killing his brother Mufasa and exiling his only son Simba after blaming him for his own father's death. We can all acknowledge that Scar was something of an evil mastermind. Resentful. It may be fair to say that Scar only became so Machiavellian because he was resentful of his brother and all he had. He was so resentful that even after he killed his own brother, he banned anyone from even uttering the name of Mufasa in Pride Rock. Ruthless. At the end of the day, Scar was so ruthless about his aspirations to get the throne that he didn't care if he had to destroy his own family to get there. Such is the sad nature of ambition. Looking at how devious Scar was in The Lion King, it makes us wonder about how the franchise would have turned out if we were dealing with Sage Wise. Rather than being a scheming uncle who was willing to get rid of his own nephew so that he could be king, Sage would have advised his nephew so that he could guide him into becoming one of the best kings Pride Rock ever had. Understanding. Another great thing about Uncle Sage is that instead of being resentful of his brother's position as the king of Pride Rock, he would have actually understood his place in this world. This would make Sage the best second in command of Pride Rock, considering how wise he is. Compassionate. Finally, Sage can also be compassionate to those around him. As such, rather than ruthlessly doing all he could to become king, there is every chance that Sage would have been the compassionate companion to both father and son as they ruled Pride Rock. Jafar! Finally, we turn our attention to Jafar, the evil sorcerer who was desperate to snatch everything away from the Sultan he so despised, deceitful. One of the first things that we notice about Jafar is that he is one deceitful character. From lying to the Sultan at every given opportunity to tricking unfortunate people like Aladdin into going into that frightening cave to get the genie's lamp, Jafar had a handful of tricks that many struggled to keep up with. Pompous. Aside from his deceitful attitude, we all know that Jafar was one pompous guy. Always thinking he was above everyone else, he even thought that the elderly Sultan was beneath him. Well, look where that attitude took him in the end. Abusive. Thanks to these two traits, we are not really surprised that Jafar often turned to abusing the vulnerable people around him when he knew they could not do anything to him. Poor Iago got the brunt of the cruel streak of this menacing wizard. Jafar was such a hideous character that we cannot help but think of Jamil, the honest advisor to the Sultan, truthful. For starters, Jamil is a massive upgrade to Jafar because of his honest nature. Thanks to this, he can help the king make his kingdom a better place for all his subjects. Humble. Aside from being an honest individual, Jamil is also a humble man who knows that he is blessed to have his place beside the Sultan. Such an attribute would surely bring the best out of everyone in the kingdom. Kind. Finally, Jamil is a kinder man than Jafar could ever be. As such, Iago and others that look up to him would be able to count on him for support. Interesting stuff, right? Looking at the antithesis of these Disney villains, it's amazing how different all these stories would have gone if the villains were not so devious or vengeful. Which flip was the most interesting to see? Please let us know in the comments section. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your fellow Disney fans. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep dreaming, stay creative,